Hey everyone, welcome. I'm Merill Fernando, a Principal Product Manager at Microsoft and your host for today's session, Foundations Getting Ready for Microsoft Entra Suite. So if you joined our first webinar on why unifying identity and network access should be a zero trust priority, welcome back. In that session, we talked about why integrating identity and network is critical. Today, we are moving from why to how to get started. So we're going to be bridging theory to practice with a look at some foundational steps complete before you can unify identity and network foundation in the real world. So these are like precursory steps that will ease your Microsoft Entra Suite deployment process. So for those of you who joined us in the first webinar, we talked about how the Entra Suite delivers unified identity-first security and network access, operational efficiency, and rapid deployment, all anchored in zero trust principles. The suite is a comprehensive family of products that secure access for any identity from anywhere to any app or resource across your digital estate, on premises, and across the cloud. Now, before we can fully deploy the Entra Suite, you need to have some foundational capabilities in place. And these specific tasks are some of the most important to prioritize. Over the next hour, we have three main demo segments, each led by one of our experts. The first one will be on automating provisioning. We'll connect an authoritative source like HR to Entra ID and use lifecycle workflows so access is right-sized from day one, adjust automatically as people move, and is removed when they leave. So no access debt. The second is about onboarding compliant device. Now, we'll lock down device join and enrollment, set Intune compliance baselines, and then we'll enforce conditional access so only healthy, trusted endpoints reach the application and AI experiences. And then third, we're going to secure our on-prem apps with conditional access. So we'll be showing you how to publish a representative like an internal app via Entra Private Access, and then apply the same policies you use in the cloud, things you're used to like MFA, device compliance, risk. So you can prepare to, replace your broad VPN trust with app level zero trust for both private and internet resources. So each foundational step we'll cover today is a prerequisite step for the core scenario in Microsoft Entra Suite. Getting these right now means your Entra Suite deployment can go much smoother when you go into the deployment phase. So automated provisioning is what makes streamlined onboarding and lifecycle possible. So every user gets the right access from day one, and we can automate, the joiner, mover, leaver workflows. With onboarding compliant devices, it's an integral priority, right, for us to protect access to all the applications and AI by ensuring only healthy, trusted endpoints can reach our sensitive resources. And that will all be enforced through conditional access. And finally, securing on-prem apps with conditional access helps enable secure access to resources, modernizing network access, and applying zero trust controls everywhere. So by the end of this series, you'll see how we piece these together to make deploying to Entra Suite smoother and more effective. And we'll end today's session with a live Q&A, which I'm very excited about, where we can address specific questions you might have. These sessions are all available on demand, and you can access them via the AK links above. So we encourage you to ask questions anytime in the chat. Now, we're going to kick off with our first topic, streamlining the identity lifecycle. This is all about ensuring the right users have the right access at the right time, which is an extremely crucial first step before layering on the rest of the Entra Suite. This is an extremely popular reason to purchase the Entra Suite, yet it is frequently not completed beforehand, so causing deployment setbacks and so on. To walk us through how Microsoft Entra helps automate identity provision and governing, I'd like to hand it over to Jorge, my colleague. Jorge, take it away.
Thank you, Merill. And hi, everyone. My name is Jorge Lopez, and I'm a senior product manager on the identity governance team. As Merill mentioned, this first section is about how to get the identity data solid, which is foundational for the Microsoft Entra Suite. So I'm going to walk you through three main key capabilities that we have for this, which is onboarding from HR sources, which is part of provisioning, automation of joiner, mover, leaver workflows, as well as entitlement management and access packages to make sure that people and identities get the right access at the right time from day one. Microsoft Entra ID Governance empowers organizations to govern access for both on-premises and cloud applications, ensuring that the right people have the right access at the right time. It automates critical identity lifecycle processes like joiner mover lever workflows, integrating seamlessly with multiple HR sources. And whether you're managing SaaS apps or legacy on-premises systems, Entra ID Governance applies consistent policy on workflows and manage entitlements with features like manager-driven access requests, privileged identity management, self-service access requests, and auto-assignment access for those needs that have like birthright access controls. This unified governance ensures compliance, reduces risks, and boosts the operational efficiency no matter where your applications are. So let's start with one of the first scenarios, which is enabling HR provisioning that basically enables these organizations to onboard and offboard users from HR systems and their source of records. This provides a great solution to automate this process and remove all the manual efforts that can lead to errors. It keeps all identity status the same, using either one of our native connectors to well-known HR systems like Workday or SuccessFactors, or from any other source of record like SQL tables, CSV files, or other type of flat files using our API-driven provision. CSV files and SQL staging tables are commonly used in enterprise integration scenarios. Employee, contractor, and vendor information are periodically exported into one of these formats. An automation tool is used to sync this data with enterprise identity directories. With API-driven inbound provisioning, IT teams can use any automation tool of their choice, example like PowerShell or Logic Apps, to modernize and simplify this integration by just posting those payloads into an API that is exposed in the Microsoft tenant that can provision users either to on-premises environments or Microsoft Entra ID as a cloud-only user. So we provide those options for organizations to do either hybrid users or cloud-only users. Let's do a quick demo on how this actually works. So one of our connectors is API-driven provisioning to Microsoft Entra ID. This connector is configured as part of the enterprise applications in the Microsoft Entra portal. From here, customers can go to provisioning, and let's take a look at those mappings because it's one of the most important pieces that we have around provisioning. The mapping determines what kind of attributes we're provisioning from HR sources into a target directory. In this case, could be Entra ID as a cloud-only user. One of the main important things is to make sure that we have a matching attribute, which serves as the anchor for that, and all of the other attributes that are needed for all of these HR workflows. We have multiple type of mappings, which is either direct, constants, or expressions that allows us to do some transformation into those attributes. For example, I can use an expression builder to determine and calculate certain attributes into multiple pieces. Maybe make some joins, maybe create some different substrings, or even make calculation with ifs and switches to determine what the end result of the target attribute we're using. So for example, if I want to make a direct transformation, I literally just have to select what is the source attribute that comes from the HR source and what is that target attribute that we're going to use for that target directory and apply that specific mapping. So once we save those changes, there's some other things that are important about this process, which is getting basically some of the other settings that you will see, like for example, send an email notification when something fails. The way that we actually post these payloads is by getting this provisioning API endpoint. This is the endpoint that is listening for those calls into HTTP post commands to be ready to basically provision those users. Once we collect that information and we make sure that we have it ready, we can use tools like Graph Explorer or some other HTTP post commands that allows us to basically make that call and provision the user. On this scenario, I'm using Graph Explorer. I'm using that endpoint that I created. So I'm just going to make a call and create this user with this JSON format. And once I run the query, I get a 202 accepted return. I should be able to search for that user and basically find it that it has been provisioned. So this allows the flexibility of take any source of record, maybe through CSV files or flat files into the provisioning engine that provisions these users into Entra ID. The next key capability is lifecycle workflows. And lifecycle workflows in Microsoft Entra ID Governance automates identity management across joiner, mover, leaver stages. So ensuring those users have the right access at the right time as well, whether onboarding a new hire, transitioning somebody to a new role, offboarding somebody directly from the HR data. So this is the system that actually triggers all of these different workflows to make sure that everything becomes automated based on this activity. Again, these workflows also span both cloud and on-premises applications, integrating from systems that are HR-driven and support granular scoping through administrative units if it's needed. So we have built-in tasks like email notifications, our groups assignments, teams assignments, and generate temporary access pass, for example, which is important for day one. So instead of having temporary password, we create this time-limited temporary access passcode on day one for the users to sign in. From there, we have a joiner scenario example that I can share with you. For instance, we have multiple built-in tasks that we can do. And I want you to pay attention to one that is specifically allow us to basically create more extensibility and talk to other APIs, which is launching custom extensions that we will connect directly to Logic Apps that allow us to basically have other calls to third-party systems and maybe existing connectors with using low-code or no-code automation systems like Logic Apps. Let me show you a demo of a lifecycle workflow that we could use. So this is one of the main things on the landing pages for lifecycle workflows. You will find multiple templates for joiner, mover, leavers. We have templates that are on demand. We have templates that also trigger with specific data. You can see those details when you expand the template summary and things like, what is the trigger type? Is it a time-based attribute? Is it something based on groups? Is it something based on attribute changes? For example, I can select one of these mover templates that is about employee job profile change. And that normally happens when we have an attribute change as the trigger. For example, the department. And we can also select group membership changes for a mover workflow if that's what we need as well. If we have specific scenarios for movers, let's say we need to use a specific attribute that is not department, we have other attributes available for that as well. And once we define what is the attribute that we want to use as the trigger, we select the scope to make sure that we select the specific users that we want this specific workflow to run with. It could be based on the same attribute that is department, or it could be based on some other attributes that is the scope. The next step is basically selecting the task. As I mentioned, we have multiple built-in tasks like removing users from selected groups because this is a mover workflow. So maybe we want to remove the user from groups. We can remove from selected teams, or we can even request access to new access packages to make sure that the user will get the right access once they move the roles. What you see now is the list of multiple built-in tasks. And as mentioned before, there's one specific that you can basically run a custom task extension that allows you to basically connect to other systems via Logic Apps with this other flow that I mentioned before. Once we add it, we can just select what is the Logic App that we want to run as part of that workflow. And this allows us to basically extend those capabilities outside of all of the built-in tasks that we have to do more things. So even Azure Functions or run your own PowerShell commands from these through hybrid runbook and all of the different things. So this basically concludes the demo of lifecycle workflows. The last key capability that I want to talk to you about is entitlement management in Microsoft Entra ID Governance. This feature empowers organizations to securely manage access and to resources like groups, apps, even SharePoint sites, or subscriptions too, at scale with precision. So through access packages, users can request access based on the role, department, or project with built-in approval workflows like sponsors or managers. It ensures that lifecycle governance for even external guests are happening when onboarding or offboarding users. Admins can also delegate control using catalogs, automating assignments with policies and enforced least privilege through dynamic role selection and even verified ID integrations. Whether you're managing privileged roles, engineering systems, business applications, access packages through entitlement management provide these compliance audits and automation needed to reduce the risk and operational efficiency. Let me show you a demo of how auto-assignment access packages work. For this one, we're going to take an existing access package for finance applications. What we want to do is go to the Policies blade and we're going to add an auto-assignment policy. These auto-assignment policies allow us to create specific rules that we want to make sure that users who match that rule will get this access package automatically. So we can select other properties like we saw before, department, and then add the operators that we need to make sure that we get that specific rule matched with some of the users that we want to get this access package automatically. We can combine rules with and or ors. Let's say that we want to combine a department equals finance, and maybe one of the extension attributes tells me what the job code of that specific role is, and I can get this access package assigned out of the box without the users having to self-request it or an administrator to assign it. This ensures that when none of these rules are matched, that access package will get removed from the user, ensuring that the users will have the right access at the right time. One of the main things that we also have as part of these access packages is that as lifecycle workflows, we can call custom extensions in different stages using multiple triggers. So this actually completes all of the solutions for custom integration or custom extensions with third-party integrations to make sure that we can also run other workflows outside of the built-in tasks. This concludes the demos, and I just want to mention what you saw around custom extensions is all of these different integrations with access packages and policies, connecting to Azure Logic Apps, additional integrations that we have with known systems, or maybe run your own integrations or your own APIs. And to close, I want to mention that all of that you saw can be also combined with our access reviews. Access reviews is the way that we run attestations for the users and make sure that the users are still having valid access via policies and reviewers that need to make sure that they get these quarterly, monthly, maybe every year reviews. And we provide recommendations as part of the access reviews in Microsoft Entra ID governance to help these reviewers to make the decisions about who keeps that access. And if it's not the case, at least we make sure that heavily regulated organizations get all of this reporting in place when it's needed. Okay, so this concludes the Microsoft Entra ID governance portion. So identity lifecycle. I will pass it to you back, Merill. Thank you very much. And thank you, everybody.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jorge. As Jorge explained, having accurate identities and up-to-date access is step one. Now, this is crucial to protect all those applications and services, including AI, that users will access. It's also a prerequisite for a lot of Entra Suite functionality. Without managed compliant devices, features like conditional access or Entra's network protections, they can't do their full job. Now, many organizations neglect this until after suite purchases. And we have someone very special joining us for this section. Our Entra community rockstar, Nathan McNulty, is going to show us how to get those device foundations in place. Nathan is a security MVP who works with many organizations on their device security. So Nathan, over to you.
Thanks, Merill. Hi, everyone. I'm Nathan McNulty, a Microsoft MVP and a Senior Security Solutions Architect at Patriot Consulting. I'm excited to talk about device trust, which, as mentioned, is fundamental to successfully leveraging the Entra Suite. In these demos, I'll walk you through how we establish secure, trusted devices and use their security posture as part of access control. For optimal security, we want to control the endpoint's lifecycle, starting from purchasing with our preferred suppliers, controlling the initial provisioning through tools such as Windows Autopilot, applying device hardening through policies, and installing our security software like Defender for Endpoint and Global Secure Access, and ensuring device health through ongoing attestation using compliance policies. Identities use endpoints to access digital assets, and what we really need is to ensure that we have the real user on a device that has earned the appropriate amount of trust for the data and resources it's trying to access. Let's start at the beginning of a device's life in your environment, joining a device to Entra ID. In the Entra portal, under Devices, Device Settings, we have a few controls to limit who can join or register devices and whether MFA is required. It's important to note these controls don't apply to hybrid join, nor does it apply to Entra join for Azure VMs or Autopilot self-deployment mode. Now, the key difference between device join and device registration is whether you can log into the device with your Entra credentials from the login screen. Only Windows and Mac OS support this, and this means that the users may join devices to Microsoft Entra control provides our first step in determining whether those devices can be joined to Entra, while iOS and Android will always be registered devices. When we configure an MDM provider, such as Microsoft Intune, the users may register their devices with Microsoft Entra control will be set to all and cannot be changed. Finally, out of the box, Microsoft Entra requires MFA for all users to join or register devices. However, it's a one-size-fits-all toggle. A more flexible approach is to use conditional access policies to secure device join. With conditional access, we can enforce more nuanced rules. For example, we might require a temporary access pass or phishing-resistant MFA, like a FIDO2 key, or the Microsoft Authenticator app when a device is being joined. And we could limit device joins to certain locations or only a subset of our users. The key point is that we want to lock down device enrollment so only authorized people on secure methods can do it. In summary, these controls determine who can join or register devices, and conditional access will determine under what conditions those users can join or register those devices. Before we turn off the default MFA control, let's create a conditional access policy specifically for device registration. Once this policy is in place, whenever someone tries to join or register a device, they'll have to go through our stronger conditional access checks. To get started, let's click Conditional Access, Policies, New Policy. We're going to give it a name like Require MFA for device join or registration. Under Users, we're going to select All Users. Under Target Resources, we're going to choose User Actions from the dropdown and select Register or Join Devices. Under Grant Controls, we may want to select Require Authentication Strength and choose something like Phishing-Resistant MFA or Phishing-Resistant MFA plus Temporary Access Pass. In this scenario, I'm going to recommend that we require multi-factor authentication, which also supports external authentication methods such as Duo or Okta. Go ahead and hit Select. We'll change this to On, and we'll hit Create. Now, one of the benefits of conditional access is we can do things like blocking for risky users or risky sign-ins or based on network location. So let's go ahead and look at that now. We're going to create a new policy, block device join or registration for risky users. We'll choose All Users again. Under our user actions, we're going to choose Register or Define Devices. We're going to choose a user risk of medium or high. Now we're going to come under Grant Controls, and you'll notice that Block is grayed out. We can't do this. However, we can require an authentication strength, and we could select something that maybe we don't issue, like a single-factor certificate. Now with this policy in place, anybody with a medium or high risk will be effectively blocked because they can't meet the requirement for a single-factor authentication that we haven't issued. This significantly limits the risk of an attacker joining a rogue device to your directory. And it establishes a strong trust. If a device is showing up as joined under your tenant, you can be confident it was done by authenticated users under the policies that you set. This step lays the foundation of device trust that we can then immediately leverage elsewhere. When devices are registered or joined, Entra issues a certificate to the device. And when the user logs into their account on the device, a primary refresh token containing the device ID is given to the device. That token is used by conditional access to look up details about the device, such as join state, operating system details, and, importantly, whether the device is compliant or not. Based on those details, we can decide whether access to the requested resources should be granted. Joining the device to Entra ID is step 1. Enrolling it in Intune is step 2. Now, Intune is what delivers device configurations, compliance policies, and potentially the Entra Suite network agent down the road. So we want to make sure only intended devices get enrolled and registered in management. Let's take a look at our controls for Intune enrollment, starting with device platform restrictions. This setting defines which users or groups are even allowed to enroll devices and which operating systems into Intune. Best practice is to avoid letting just everyone enroll an unlimited number of devices. For example, you might set it so only full-time employees in certain groups can enroll devices, or exclude offshore users or other accounts. And we may also want to limit the number of devices that a person can bring in, using device limit restrictions. Sometimes it can also be helpful to give enrollment notifications so users know when a new device has been enrolled in case it wasn't them. Unfortunately, the defaults in Intune are designed to ease deployment, so we need to implement stronger controls. Let's take a look at how we can do that. Let's go to Device Platform Restrictions. And we're going to take a look at the default policy for all users. We select Properties and edit the platform settings. We'll notice personally owned devices are allowed. We may choose to block those. You could optionally go a bit further and block all device platforms for default, and then we might create a separate restriction that allows for enrollment of company resources or personally owned. We're going to do the personally owned here. So let's come back to our enrollment restrictions, and let's say that we may have some iOS devices. You will need to create a restriction per each operating system, and let's call this one Allow BYOD. So in this case, we're going to allow personally owned devices, but we may not want to allow things that are unsupported operating systems. So we can actually specify the minimum and maximum operating system versions for each of the different platforms. In this case, we're going to assign it to a group. Let's call this allow BYOD. Now, this group could be empty, and we could selectively add users to the group when they need to do the enrollment. We could also wrap it up in an access package and use entitlement management with all of the wonderful approval workflows that has. This is only evaluated when a device is being enrolled, and so we can remove the user once they have enrolled their device, and then it prevents them from enrolling future devices. Let's go ahead and save this. And just remember, we would have to do this for each of the additional operating systems for whatever conditions that we want to allow. Now, we may also come on over to device limit restrictions because 5 devices, 10 devices, 15 may be too many. And so we can adjust our default, and we may choose something more reasonable, like 1 or 2 devices. Now, again, just like we did with our other restrictions, we're going to create a new one, and we might allow for 3 devices. And in this case, we'll probably use that same group. You could create a separate one if you wanted to, but we'll choose allow BYOD. And we'll create. And so now, by default, users are allowed 2. And again, only at time of enrollment, it checks to see if the user already has 2 or more. And then if they do, they would be blocked. And in that case, we might add them to the 3rd to allow them to get a 3rd device in. So this is how we can raise the bar so that even if an attacker compromised the user account and got a token for a device to join or register it to Entra, they still can't complete that Intune enrollment because of the device platform restrictions or the limit restrictions. And we've now effectively locked that attacker out, preventing them from achieving the next step. Even once a device is enrolled and configured, its health state can drift. It might miss a patch or even be infected with malware. Intune allows us to define compliance policies, for example, require PIN and encryption, block jailbroken devices, ensure the OS is patched to a minimum version, and so on. With those policies in place, each device reports a compliance status, compliant or not compliant. Now here's where Entra ID and Conditional Access step in. We can create a conditional access policy that requires a device to be marked as compliant in order to access specific apps or data. Let's look at how we can create compliance policies in Intune under Devices, Compliance. As you can see, I've already created compliance policies for the various operating systems, but let's walk through creating one for Windows 10. We'll hit Create Policy, choose Windows 10 and later from the dropdown, and we'll choose the compliance policy, hit Create. We'll give it a name like Windows Compliance Testing. Under Compliance Settings, we can define custom compliance. These are PowerShell scripts that will evaluate registry settings, running processes, services installed, maybe your security tools. In this case, I'm looking for Defender antivirus exclusions that shouldn't exist. We also need a JSON file that defines the output from that script so it can evaluate whether it's compliant or not. Under Device Health, we might want to ensure BitLocker, Secure Boot, and Code Integrity are enabled. Under Device Properties, we might specify a minimum operating system version, like 22H2. Now anything older than that version will be blocked. We may also want to ensure that the device is encrypted, that firewall, TPM, antivirus, and anti-spyware are all registered with Windows Security Center. If we're using Defender, we can also ensure that a minimum platform version is enabled, maybe the one from June. We can also ensure that intelligence updates are up to date and that real-time protection is enabled. If you've enrolled in Defender for Endpoint, we can also use the threat level from that, so maybe clear. Now, if the device is not compliant, we can decide to mark that immediately, or we could do fractions of a day if we needed to, maybe 0.25. We can also do sending an email to the end user, or adding that device to a retire list if it's been over 90 days. For assignments, we will typically assign to all users, and we could filter based on personal versus company-owned devices if you allow for that to be enrolled. And we'll hit Create. Now, if you wanted to do custom compliance scripts, those are going to be up here under Scripts, and we can add shell scripts for Linux or PowerShell scripts for Windows 10 or later. If you wanted to use Defender for Endpoint threat levels in our policies, we're going to come under Tenant Administration, Connectors and Tokens, Defender for Endpoint, and we need to enable the platforms that we want that telemetry to be sent from Defender for Endpoint to Intune. And then we can use that in our compliance policy evaluation. If you're using a third-party mobile threat defense product, we can add a connector here for those as well. And finally, if you're using a third-party MDM, we can still get compliance. We need to come in here and add our compliance partner for whatever operating systems you might be supporting there. As long as we don't have any conditional access policies using compliance data, our compliance policies do nothing more than set the isCompliant value on the device object. This allows us to deploy all of our policies, make adjustments as needed to get everything healthy, and then we can start enforcing. So now that we've deployed all of our compliance policies, let's create a conditional access policy for device compliance. We'll come into the Entra portal and click New Policy. We'll give it a name like Require Compliant Devices. We'll choose all users, excluding any break glass accounts. For target resources, let's choose all resources. Under Grant Controls, we're going to choose Require Device to be marked as compliant and hit Select. You're going to get this warning that on some platforms, a user might see a prompt in a browser for using a certificate. I think this is okay because we want that reporting data, but if you don't want that interruption, we could choose to exclude those device platforms. And then down here, I want my account to be affected. We're doing report only anyway, so we're going to go ahead and create that policy in report only. Now that we've created that conditional access policy, here's a perfect example of how compliance could save us from an attacker-controlled device if they were to get malware on one of our devices. This image shows the device attributes we can use in conditional access policies. And you may notice the device is Entra-joined, our first step, and enrolled in Intune, our second step, but is compliant is false, meaning it didn't meet the requirements we specified. So say Defender for Endpoint discovered malware, this device is now marked as not compliant, and access to new applications are blocked until that risk has been remediated. So to wrap up my section, by securing device onboarding and enforcing compliance policies, we turn our devices into trusted assets that continuously meet our security bar. In the context of Entra Suite, this is huge. Nearly every advanced capability, ranging from conditional access policies to intra-internet access filters, we can key off device trust. With identities governed, thanks to Jorge's steps, and devices managed and compliant, you've built a strong platform for the Entra Suite. You eliminate a lot of surprises and potential delays in deployment because users are already on the right devices with the right configurations. Now that the user and device foundations are in place, the next step is to modernize how these users and devices actually connect to your resources. This is about unifying identity and network access, our third scenario. To walk us through replacing those old VPNs and securing on-premises and internet access with Entra, I'll hand it over to Merill and Merill Lee.
Thanks, Nathan. I love those handy tips you shared. So far, we've addressed identity and device readiness. Our third foundational step is all about the network. How do we give users secure access to the apps and resources they need without relying on implicit trust or antiquated approaches like, always-on VPNs? This is where the Entra Suite's global secure access comes in. It's a new approach that ties network access directly into our identity system. Merill, take it away.
Hi, everyone. My name is Merill. I'm a senior product manager on the Microsoft Entra team. Today, I'm going to walk through how you can combine global secure access with conditional access to secure your on-premises applications. So what's the problem we're addressing? Many organizations still host applications and resources in on-premises data centers, but their employees are now working remotely from all over the world. The legacy solution was to use a VPN for remote access. But legacy VPNs publish entire corporate networks for broad access. They do not allow for granular controls for specific applications, and they can introduce a lot of risks. Employees need to access many apps on premises or in the cloud from any location and any device. But we must protect data so that only the right users access the right resources under the right conditions. In other words, we want to enforce zero trust principles. Never trust by default, always verify context. By unifying signals across identity, endpoint, and network, the Entra Suite gives you a single control plane to manage access, whether your employees are connecting to private applications hosted locally on your private network or any internet apps or resources beyond your network boundaries. This means you can continuously enforce consistent policies, detect threats earlier, and respond faster, no matter where your users are or what they're trying to access. To maximize the benefits of Zero Trust network access, consider planning your conditional access policies in a way that minimizes complexity by designing them from global to granular, using the target resources now available to you. To do this, you'll want to reduce complexity by limiting the number of conditional access policies in your tenant. You can do this by leveraging custom attributes within an enterprise application to target conditional access policies. I'll show a demo for how to do this shortly. You should start broad by defining global conditional access policies that will apply to all global secure access users by securing the resource Microsoft Apps with Global Secure Access. Then you can define per traffic profile conditional access policies that apply to all users assigned to a particular traffic forwarding profile by securing the GSA Private Access Traffic Forwarding Profile, the GSA Internet Access Traffic Forwarding Profile, and the GSA Microsoft 365 traffic forwarding profile. Next, classify applications by persona, security requirements, and risk levels, and then apply custom attributes to these groups. This enables you to define conditional access policies that target applications within each group. Then you'll want to get even more granular by defining per enterprise application conditional access policies for your most sensitive and valuable groups of applications. You can also configure Microsoft Entra Private Access for Active Directory domain controllers to help strengthen secure access for on-premises users by enforcing conditional access and MFA to on-premises applications that use Kerberos authentication with domain controllers. I want to highlight here all of the new target resources for Global Secure Access, which have been added to enhance conditional access policies. Global Secure Access includes Microsoft Entra Private Access and Microsoft Entra Internet Access, each securing different aspects of your environment and exposing new conditional access scenarios. These scenarios start with global control over all access to your Global Secure Access services, moving to control over specific traffic forwarding profiles, and finally granular control over data accessible through each traffic forwarding profile. Conditional access has been extended to include several additional target resources, and I'll talk about each one briefly. To apply these resources, open the target resources configuration settings in your conditional access policy and enter the resource name you want to configure. First, we have Microsoft Apps with Global Secure Access. This policy applies when a user initially connects to the service from the client, regardless of which tunnel the user will access. For example, you can create a policy that requires MFA to connect to your tenant's Global Secure Access service. Next, we have the GSA Private Access Traffic Forwarding Profile. This policy applies only to users that connect to private resources defined by quick access or individual enterprise applications. For example, you can create a policy that requires step-up authentication for users with elevated sign-in risk. We have the GSA Internet Traffic Forwarding Profile. This policy applies only to users that connect to internet resources such as SaaS applications and Microsoft 365 applications. For example, you can create a policy that blocks all access to defined applications when sign-in risk is high. And we have the GSA Microsoft 365 Traffic Forwarding Profile. This policy only applies to users that connect to Microsoft applications. For example, you can create a policy that blocks access to your Microsoft 365 applications unless the connection is established through the Global Secure Access tunnel. We can also target, of course, Global Secure Access enterprise applications. Policies targeted to specific enterprise applications are only applied to users that attempt to connect to the application segments defined within the enterprise application. For example, you can create a policy that requires FIDO authentication for your most valuable applications. Finally, we have Global Secure Access Web Content Filtering. Applying conditional access policies to your Microsoft Entra Internet Access security profiles is necessary to assign the web content filtering rules you create for your users and groups. Next, I want to show how you can apply more layers of security to on-premises applications using risk-based conditional access. Risk-based conditional access is not new, but now we can protect private applications with risk-based conditional access using network context-aware signals. The reason I want to highlight this feature is because this is an easy win for identity administrators looking to secure their tenants, and now you can apply risk-based controls at the network layer. We've spoken with many customers who are able to prevent true compromises such as password spray and leaked credentials simply by applying these policies for user and sign-in risk. Microsoft recommends at a minimum having a user risk policy to require a secure password change when a user risk level is high, and having a sign-in risk policy to require MFA when sign-in risk levels are medium or high. Again, this capability is not new, but the ability to add these controls at the network layer is a game changer and a key differentiator for Microsoft's VPN replacement solution. To close out this session, the part of this presentation that I'm most excited to show you is how you can scale conditional access policies and simplify configuration for your tenant. For this demo, I've created a custom attribute called Conditional Access. Within it, I've defined a set of attributes aligned to conditional access requirements, such as require MFA, require phishing-resistant MFA, and other requirements. As an organization, we've established a standard and agreed on these 5 methods through which users can access applications. So now if we go into conditional access policies, I've created blanket policies. For example, we have a policy requiring multi-factor authentication, and this applies to all users excluding break glass accounts. And we have the custom attribute require MFA configured, and the MFA requirement checked. I've also configured a policy requiring compliant devices, which has the custom attribute configured and the compliant device check selected. Now that we've defined a set of attributes to meet those conditional access requirements, this is where the simplicity and scalability of this product really shines. When onboarding an application like the RDP Global Secure Access app, you can go to custom security attributes and instead of creating thousands of policies for different applications, simply select the appropriate attribute. For example, I've created a requirement that says require MFA, which I can select. Or since this is an on-premises RDP application, I can require compliant device and set that as the standard for the Global Secure Access app. So rather than creating thousands of policies for thousands of different applications, because Global Secure Access is integrated into Entra ID, you can define attributes and say that specific applications require specific types of MFA. This is not a new feature, but it's a different way of thinking about policies and applying them at scale. And that's all I have to cover today. To recap, we've just covered Global Secure Access enhancements to conditional access policies, how to secure private applications with conditional access and leverage risk-based conditional access, and how to use custom attributes to apply these policies at scale. For next steps, I've included some resources for how to get started configuring risk-based conditional access and securing on-premises Global Secure Access applications. These are excellent resources you can use to progress in your Zero Trust journey. Now I'll pass it on to Charles Lewis, who will walk through some additional resources you can explore to dive deeper.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Merill and team. I'm Charles Lewis, a principal architect in Microsoft's Fast Track organization. We really want to ensure that you're empowered with the right resources to get started on your journey with Entra Suite. First and foremost, you can sign up for a new trial of Entra Suite in your tenant by visiting the link aka.ms Entra Suite trial. In addition, our Fast Track team is really your built-in benefit to help you plan, deploy, and adopt Microsoft Entra solutions with confidence in your organization. If you qualify with 150 or more eligible licenses, you can request assistance from our Fast Track specialists at no extra cost by visiting aka.ms M365 RFA. We've also tried to make Entra configuration and deployment easier with our advanced deployment guides and our step-by-step deployment videos at the link above. And finally, please don't forget, register for our third webinar happening on October 21st, where the team will build on what was covered today. And with that, thank you so much. Merill, over to you.
Thanks, Charles. Now, to recap, the key takeaways from today's Foundations webinar. Number one, streamline identity lifecycle with automated provisioning and workflows. We saw how automating provisioning from HR and managing the joiner, mover, leaver process ensures every user's access is correct and up to date automatically. Now, this is the bedrock of least privileged access. By doing this, you set up your Entra Suite environment so that when you turn on features like ID governance or start assigning sensitive apps, everything is in order. No excess access lurking around. It's truly a prerequisite that saves you from headaches later on. Number two, protect access to all apps and services, device onboarding and compliance. We learned that by enrolling devices in Intune, enforcing compliance, and using conditional access, you ensure that only trusted, healthy devices can access corporate resources. This protects everything from classic apps to the latest AI services your organization might use. It also lays the groundwork for deploying things like internet access or private access, which rely on having that device trust. Essentially, you're turning each device into a secure launchpad for your users, which makes your overall environment dramatically safer. And number three, secure network access to internal and external resources. We saw how moving away from VPNs to Entra's identity-centered network access gives you fine-grained control. Each internal app can be accessed without exposing your whole network, and policies follow every user regardless of where the app lives. This step ties together the identity and device signals from step 1 and 2 and enforces them at the network layer. By implementing this, you're ensuring that your users can work from anywhere and still be under full protection of your zero trust policies. In short, these three foundational steps directly support the core scenarios of the Entra Suite. By investing time in these now, you're effectively paving a smooth runway for your full Entra Suite deployment. Organizations that handle provisioning and device compliance upfront find that rolling out some of the more complex stuff like conditional access for every app, advanced governance, or the network access features become much more of a plug-and-play exercise rather than a fire drill. And with that, let's jump over to our live AMA and answer any questions you have. Hey folks, welcome to our live AMA, and I'm super excited to have Nathan, Rue, Merill, and Charles joining us. We are all set to go with your questions today. Cool. So let's just do a quick round robin. What's the one metric that you track weekly, to prove that the foundations are working? What do you look for in a trend like that? Drew, you want to start first?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Merill. Honestly, first thing that comes to mind is that source of authority. You talk about foundations, and Entra provides that. You can monitor that through the provisioning logs. So you want to make sure that's what you expect it to be. So that's my first metric for you.
Nice. Awesome. Nathan?
Yeah, sign-in failure analysis, or just sign-in analysis in general. Always good to see what all might be getting blocked. Is it an attacker that made it through some of those first steps, right? And something we need to shore up, a compromised account. So things like that.
Nice. Is that the Azure workbook is a good place, right? And also the
excellent
sign-in logs.
Yeah, sign-in policy analysis as well. So newer feature, open the conditional access policy. You got that little button up there on the top.
Yes. Yeah.
Yep, definitely. And so especially if we're deploying out these compliance policies, right, we want to be able to see what the impact might be in that report-only state. So it's a great way to see that trending down.
Cool.
Yeah.
Merill, what do you look for?
So I'm primarily focused on two product areas right now. So global secure access and identity protection and risk-based conditional access. So I like to see for global secure access adoption rates and how many users' devices are being onboarded. And then I also like to look at from the client end, any performance metrics that the end user can share. And then for risk-based conditional access, similar to what Nathan said, sign-in failures, any signals, using the workbooks like the AAD user risk events tables, we can get a lot of great insights looking at the number of high-risk users in your tenant, looking at the risk event types and seeing trends of specific risk event types. So always looking at those types of metrics.
Nice. Yeah, that's a really handy one. The report is so easy to see for risk reports, and then work out whether it's a false positive or whether you need to investigate further. Cool. Charles, what's your tip?
Yeah, great question. I think conditional access policy debt is certainly something that we need to focus on as a metric. I think we see lots of deployments out there with conditional access policies, numerous policies targeted to individual applications as an example. And this is going to make it very difficult to manage your infrastructure and really even understand your overall security posture. And I think Merill really hit on some of this as well. Like you should be able to see that policy debt start to trend downward as we start filtering applications based on things like custom security attributes. And that's going to help you, I think, better scale and really target the number of applications in a more manageable fashion.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks. Yeah, so some of you might have realized that Jorge is not here with us for the Q&A. But we do have a really special guest here today. Rue Campbell has joined us. He's a Microsoft Security MVP, and he leads the Microsoft consultancy at Threadscape. I think many people already know Rue. He doesn't need an introduction, but Rue is also an author. You've written a book, right, Rue, on mastering M365 Defender, and you're a LinkedIn Learning instructor as well. So thanks so much for joining us.
Honor to be with you. Thanks for the invitation.
Cool. Okay. So the next question we got is, what are some of the most common mistakes people make when starting out with conditional access? Rue, I know it's one of your favorite topics. You've done so many YouTube videos on it and have live guests. So what's sort of the top 2, 3?
Yeah, I guess first thing that comes to mind is no clear policy framework, right? Conditional access really is that enforcement engine behind Zero Trust and Entra, and having no cohesive story to your conditional access, that's going to that might work for now, but over time that's going to result in a little bit of pain. So taking that time to think about the architecture, and as you do that, start with the fundamentals, right? Blocking legacy authentication, MFA for everyone, for all apps, all that good stuff.
Nice. Awesome. Merill, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think those are great points. One thing I also see is a lot of people go and dive right in and enforce the policies without enabling report-only mode first, but it's really good. We really recommend using report-only mode so that you don't end up accidentally locking folks out of the critical resources. And then some of the other mistakes I see are naming conventions. I'm definitely guilty of this, sometimes just naming the conditional access policy like CA1, CA2, and not describing what it applies to, what sets of users, what it's for. And then I also feel that there are kind of these two extremes people fall into, where either they're relying too much on self-remediation and on these policies and on their zero trust infrastructure working, but not reviewing the sign-in logs and really doing the work of the SOC analyst and seeing what behavior is going on in the tenant, or the opposite extreme of just doing everything manually and not enabling risk-based conditional access and really leveraging all of these automations that we have to secure the tenant.
Nice. Yep, that's really good. Anyone else have thoughts? Happy to answer them.
Yeah, I mean, my big thing would be stop picking and choosing specific apps because you're going to miss stuff. It's just the way conditional access works. So you got to target everything. And then if you really have those things, you got to exclude them. So
yeah, you only have a limit of like 190 policies, right? So how many can you target individually? Yep,
absolutely.
catch them all like the Pokemon. Cool. We have one from John. John on Tech Community is asking, great session. I want to get started with the trial of Entra Suite. The information here was amazing and it's overwhelming. Oh, yes. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
So when he's asking, when he starts the 90-day trial, what do you recommend he start with as a baseline or a starting point? Who wants to take that?
I can maybe talk a little bit to that, Merill, and some of this is even from a fast track perspective. But I think the first 30 days, one of the things that you want to do kind of that first week, really focus on kind of discovery and design. So inventory your identities, inventory your applications, understand your overall device posture. Start looking at sign-in logs. I think this has been called out quite a bit, but understand how and what your users are actually accessing. What do those access patterns actually look like? And then start to standardize kind of early, right? So look at that policy design document that you want to put together. So understand your exceptions, like where are you going to have specific exceptions in your policy? And then kind of week 2, move into that pilot phase where you start to build some of this out. Merill talked about, kind of your conditional access policies in report-only mode. Set up those join, remove, or leaver scenarios, your HR provisioning in a test scope, get your device join scenarios and device registration really secured. Get that first application, that private access application published as an example. Kind of week 3, validate and measure. Just, you really want to look at the impact of the policies that you've configured, ensure that you've kind of proved out those join, remove, or leaver scenarios. And then, week 4 is really start to operationalize. So publish your run books and get the artifacts put together, your policy inventory, your exception register, that type of stuff. I think that's probably a pretty good first 30-day that you can start to work through.
That's an awesome step-by-step. And so this is the second webinar in the series of 3. In the third one, we're actually going to go a lot more into the depth of how you can, exactly what Charles spoke about, but we're going to spend a whole hour going through more in-depth details about setting up Entra Suite. And that will go live on beyond the 21st of October. So ak.ms/Entra Suite playbook is a good place as well to start. And we'll share all those links. Cool. Anyone else tips you would have for someone starting out on a trial, something to look out for with the Entra Suite?
I can jump in. I get one. The first thought that comes to mind for me is, look at it as not just a trial, like was kind of mentioned there. Look at it as that proper proof of concept. And a big part of that means, depending on what your organization is like, it means breaking down some silos insofar as Entra Suite is a very unique offering insofar as it converges identity and networking. And these are two areas that in a lot of big complex organizations are very siloed. So you have to work together, and then you identify, frankly, some of the things that win folks over, right? So one thing that comes to mind for me is one of the things that wins over security folks is it's like, well, hey, all of a sudden I get this really cool capability with not a lot of effort to give me really robust token protection and things like that. So that communication, winning over stakeholders, that's a big part of it, rather than just looking at it as some kind of tech demo.
Awesome. Yeah, like that's the thing I really love about the Entra Suite. It brings together identity and like the network access, like things that would take like a very complex setup. You can now just create a CA policy and you're done, right? You can apply phishing resistant MFA to on-prem app without the dev of the app even knowing anything about it. So really cool stuff. But yeah, it does collapse things that used to be in silos before, with networking and identity being very different teams. So they need to now, learn each other's skills. And for small orgs, they can do things today a lot more easier. So I really love that. Cool. We have a really interesting question. The next one from the tech community as well. Is it possible to fully replace on-prem Active Directory with Microsoft Entra? Is it recommended? How do we go about starting the migration? Nathan, your thoughts?
I'm not gonna put words in Microsoft's mouth, but yes, recommended. Yeah, I mean, as you can see, some of the new features that are getting delivered, right? We have group SOA change, so we can now flip a group from being Active Directory based to Entra based, and then write that back. We can also now transfer SOA for users. That was just announced in public preview, right? So a lot of these things are focusing on minimizing our usage of AD. We still have reasons, right? If you have LDAP applications, things that require a password back there, Kerberos. But as we're moving away from those, right, we can start to maybe minimize how much we have in AD, eventually moving away from those. Another stopgap measure is intra-domain services. And so we kind of don't have to manage that infrastructure anymore. We still kind of have AD. Azure Files is still dependent on some things. And so, yeah, there's a little bit there, but we have lots of customers who move completely away and go Entra only. So definitely doable and a good goal.
Cool. Yeah. Ruth, anyone thoughts or what else to watch out for as they move?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, one of the first thoughts that comes to mind for me, depending on where you're at with that journey, maybe just throw out there one of the misconceptions, right? Is that you have to do it all as once as like some kind of big bang migration, and that's really not the case. Like Nathan mentioned, you can kind of dip your toes in with moving things like the source of authority, but frankly, one of the big things you can do almost right away with, I would say, less of a reason not to than ever, is go Entra join, like was in Nathan's demo, right? There's some misinformation out there that would imply that, hey, if I have any AD presence at all, I have to go hybrid join. And the bottom line is, unless you have resources that use computer object-based authentication, which are becoming few and far between, that's really not the case. And again, we speak about POCs. That is the perfect thing you can POC to kind of dip your toes in with going cloud native.
Nice. Awesome. Cool. So another question, moving on to devices. BYOD, bring your own device, is unavoidable, a standard part, of most orgs, where eventually you need to allow people to bring their own device and get access to corporate resources. How do we handle these situations? Like, you can take the different views you can take, right, from a pure security perspective, and then there's a pragmatic perspective as well. So what are your thoughts on BYOD, and what's the best way to go about it? Nathan?
Yeah, I'll take that one. So there's not an easy way to say it, but allowing BYOD opens a gap that we just can't close. Like, once you let the cat out of the bag, kind of thing. But there are things that we can do to minimize that risk, right? And so one of the most common ones that we recommend is VDI, something like Cloud PC, right? Windows 365, AVD, or Citrix environment, something.
Yeah.
Give them access into something that you do still control,
Yeah.
and then you can do your compliance and all that. MDM enrollment of personally owned devices, like you don't know the health that it came in the first place, but then there's legal and other questionable risks. So mobile application management's excellent for mobile devices, especially. We do have Edge, which works for some things. So there's some limits there for sure. Let's see here. What else? So many things. Limiting just BYOD as a default posture. That's always great. So maybe wrap up who's allowed to do those things, right? Like I showed in access packages, especially. Like get approval before you're allowed to do those tasks.
Yeah. So that I've noticed that trend even with some of like the big customers I work with. They're tired of BYOD and especially the desktop side of things and giving access to various things. It's really hard for them to control what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And now with AI, it's even more harder, right? Because AI can read screens and like there's so many things in place. So yeah, they are looking to move to AVD and like have a completely sort of a managed way for them to know what's happening when devices connect to their network.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely.
Yeah, I think that goes back to something Rue said earlier too, where like having governance or understanding of how you're designing your conditional access policies, you need to know what your resources are. You need to have that inventory and what level of like critical data is in those systems. That way you can section that off and say like, if you're accessing HR data or any of this other stuff, it's got to be on one of those managed compliant devices. Yeah. But maybe timesheet and other things, they're not as important of a resource. And so we can expose those to unmanaged endpoints, right? So you got to know all that though.
Yeah, it's such a good point, and it's something that's always front of mind for me when we talk about BYOD. The cat's out the bag is a great way of saying it, but that doesn't mean all the cats have to be out the bag, right? We can, but due to the customizable nature of conditional access, you can say, hey, things like our core productivity and collaboration, email teams, all that, go for it on BYOD. ERP systems, more sensitive apps, contain that to compliant devices.
Cool, awesome. Right, so we have an interesting question from Matthew. He's asking roadmap. Usually, not usually, we avoid sharing roadmap unless it's published. But he's asking, is there a plan to incorporate the GSA client functionality into Windows OS, in the Defend agent, for example? Merill?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's feedback we've heard a lot. So it's definitely something we're exploring. We'd love to hear from you too, if this is something that your organization would really need, and that would allow us to prioritize this and make sure that it's, something that we're heavily focused on. But yeah, it's definitely something we're exploring.
Awesome. Yes, for those listening, a great way to give feedback is, go to the Entra portal. And if this feature, being built into Windows or through Defend Agent is important for you, or for that matter, any other feature, just go write a comment. It all gets accumulated, and those metrics really help prioritize because we only have so many devs building all this. So your input helps to pick and choose what is more important for our customers. So please do share your feedback. There's another note from tech community. Non-Entra related, but this lineup is incredible. Yeah. So how does so who is that asking? How does it feel to be this awesome, and how do you all keep delivering such high quality knowledge to the community?
Someone's seeding that question.
Yeah, I think I'm speaking on behalf of everyone when I say thank you all for doing and for sharing expertise so generously. Yes, I learned so much from Nathan and Drew. From all the the public things to share, and obviously thoroughly I learned a lot about GSA and I need to learn and keep up with those things. And yeah, Charles with all of his insights. Yeah, Nathan and Drew, thanks so much.
Yeah, honored.
I know, right? Thanks for having us. Appreciate it.
Yeah,
awesome.
Yeah. I would also call it, speaking personally, I've been doing my quote-unquote Microsoft community stuff for the best part of over 5 years now. And it is honestly such an incredible community. And guys like Nathan, guys like yourself, Merill, the stuff you folks share, I find that's such a, speaking personally, that's such a value add to the Microsoft ecosystem. It is that openness of the product team and also folks who use it in the contributions they make. So yeah, we're getting all cheesy now, but
Yeah.
got to get that right.
Yeah.
Cool.
That's good.
Awesome. Great. So next question. Can you elaborate on how Microsoft Entra Private Access helps to replace legacy VPNs with Zero Trust Network Access? And how is it different from like a traditional VPN?
Thank you. That's a really great question. So we talked about this before in some of the demos, but the traditional VPNs publish access to your entire corporate network, and that exposes a lot of risk. So even if you have MFA applied, everything behind your corporate network end users have access to. So with global secure access, we're able to apply these granular levels of control, both at the identity level and at the network layer. So you can protect the file shared, RDP, on-premises app, you can protect all of your cloud resources, and it's all centralized in one place through conditional access through the Zero Trust policy engine, and everything is also within the Microsoft ecosystem. So you have all of the benefits of that as well, where we have points of presence all over the world. So it's really a game changer. And I also want to say, just personally, within Microsoft, we are all connecting to our resources using global secure access. And it's been amazing not having to connect and fiddle with the VPN all of the time. I think anyone who's ever had a bad experience having to constantly reconnect to VPNs can relate to this, but it's just amazing. You just have access to everything that you need to access for work. We're on a globally distributed team. So it's really great to be able to work with folks all over the world and be able to access everything we need.
Cool. Charles or anyone else thoughts on how private access is different from traditional VPN?
Yeah, I think Merill hit it. I know just at Microsoft, we've had multiple VPN solutions that we've had to use. I think as we kind of did incubation with this in Fast Track as well, that was maybe one of the key use cases, is this ability to quickly deploy kind of that quick access application, have a broad set of IPs or endpoints internally that you want to provision access to, but still maintain that high level of security that I think she talked about as well with those conditional access policies. So now you can really apply those modern security controls as well back to those kind of legacy potential on-premises applications.
Cool.
Yeah. One thing I think that makes it really unique is the application discovery piece. So you set up a quick access, it kind of replaces your VPN, but then as users are using it, they're actually ingesting all the telemetry, and then you can see what resources users are accessing, how many, how much they're accessing it. You can start to separate those out into their own applications, and then you can govern those with different conditional access policies that is separate from that quick access piece. So instead of just like RDP in general, I do MFA once and now I'm RDP to everything, you can say, well, these specific servers have different requirements for phishing resistant versus something else, and it's super easy, just all right there in the portal. So I like that feature a lot.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think that's one of the neat things, right? Because of that agent running on the desktop, it can collect a lot more information than you could before, and in real time. So it's super easy to visually see all of that and then be able to create your policy that, rather than blindly applying a policy to a certain network segment. Cool. A question for Charles is about, there's another one from the tech community. So any tips for dealing with a rat's nest of CA policies? Is it best to start from scratch or try and identify the gaps and close them? So yeah, I think this is a common question that now that I think conditional access was launched maybe like 12, 14 years ago, and lots of orgs have, built out CA policies, and you respond to incidents or some urgent thing comes up and you just have a sprawl of conditional access policies. And I feel a lot of people have been asking me the same question recently, like, should they just wipe everything out and start from scratch, or try to identify the gaps and close them? Like, do you have a preference? What do you think?
Can I make a quick plug here as well, maybe to conditional access optimization agent? I don't know if you've seen that, used that, had any experience with it. I think it is certainly a great way to start to identify where those potential gaps are in users or applications that have been published, and even start to see where some of that policy sprawl overlaps. So I'm going to make a plug to that first and foremost, that we have certainly started to leverage agentic AI to help, because that's been such a common problem. And then I think from there, what what I've helped customers with, you got to start inventorying what your policies are doing. And so you've got to go in and see what buckets of users am I targeting? What applications am I targeting? What access controls, as an example, am I applying to these? Where is there that overlap? And then I think Merill hit this big time in her section, which is leveraging custom security attributes where you can actually target those policies based on security principle and start migrating to that so that you can really reduce that overall conditional access policy sprawl. I think that's maybe a quick answer to that I'll provide. But
Brew, thoughts on your favorite topic, conditional access? Is it a clean start or?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Speaking personally, I do like a clean start, but that's not to say burn it all to the ground and then start from scratch. Insofar as you will have a period where you're maybe side by side. And what I mean by that is you don't just want to go in there and say, hey, this is messy, let's delete it all and start from scratch, because that's going to create some significant gaps, right?
Yeah.
But me personally, the way I do it is I use things like the insights and reporting workbook to figure out, well, what am I actually protecting here? And after I've ascertained that, I usually go through an exercise of figuring out personas and figuring out, okay, well, who are the users in my tenant? What are the apps they need to access? What are the locations and risk profiles that I need to associate with them? What authentication methods can I throw their way? Can we go all the way with phish resistant, or do some folks have to still use SMS? Build that profile of your personas and then architect conditional access around that. So I would do that in tandem. So as I'm pulling down old policies, I'm putting up new ones that are got all that good stuff like naming conventions and all the rest of it.
Awesome. Yeah, I think, like I would tilt towards doing it that way, because you can't just go in and wipe everything out. Like the help desk will be screaming at you once if you just make even one mistake. So it's better to come up with a design for having learned from the policies you have over the last what you've been creating for so long. Learn from that and then do a complete new design, which uses new features like app filters and things that weren't there before, right? So you would have picked specific apps and you can move over to leveraging things like app filters to simplify the number of apps and so on. So that's how I would do it as well. Cool.
Yeah, the other thing that can help is you're consolidating those, just lump them into groups. So application specific policies, location based policies, baseline policies, risk policies. If you lump them all together, you can get a better visual of like, what can I consolidate and merge together? Because apps tend to be like the biggest one. We target individual ones and they all have the same control. And then you're like, sweet, I just wiped out 20 policies. And, it makes it a lot more digestible when you're like, because I feel overwhelmed looking at 180 policies and I'm like, I don't have enough room to even put report only in there.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
yeah.
A lot of app folks, when they come to the Entra admin, they come thinking the app is a snowflake, it's very special, and it's only this, and this number of users should access it. But if you use, the different levels of classifying apps, as you said, you can bring it down to a lot less, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and targeting those Snowflake apps with the user in conditional access doesn't prevent other users from accessing the app they're assigned. We've seen that a lot of times too.
Oh, yes, that's true. Because people think of it in, the firewall terms.
Yeah.
Cool. The next question we have is, if you're replacing VPN with private app or apps, how should we onboard to Entra Private Access first? Which conditional access would you, pair it with on day one?
That's a good question. I can take that. So I think this ties into, a lot of what we were talking about before. We're taking inventory of your resources and your application. Starting with a high value, highly scoped app is definitely a good move. And then for conditional access, Microsoft has kind of baseline recommendations that apply to most organizations, depending on the risk level you're comfortable with in your organization, of course. But the two that we generally recommend are having a policy to require a secure password change for user risk, or MFA for a sign-in risk for medium or high-risk users. And depending on the risk level that you're comfortable with in your organization, you may choose to also block some of those users or add exclusions for certain users. So it's kind of dependent organization, but definitely starting with those very critical resources and taking inventory of what you have in your tenant.
Nice. Awesome. Yeah. So that's the first thing always. Inventorying is the best place to start with. So we have Joanna asking us, how does Entra Suite work with on-prem domain controllers? Thoughts?
There's several pieces of that.
Yeah, it's a big question.
Right. Well, because I mean, we have like lifecycle workflows, all the automation with entitlement management. Those can all we take HR sources, hook it into API-driven provisioning. We're sending SCIM data over, and then that's sent down to on-prem, a provisioning agent, right? And that writes all the users and attributes and all this wonderful stuff into AD. And then of course, Interconnect Sync or Cloud Sync, whatever. We're syncing that data back up into cloud, right? As modifications are made there. So there's that component, but we also have private access, right? Allowing for getting Kerberos tickets, all that kind of stuff. So there's lots of pieces that still interplay with Active Directory that are super helpful. Mm-hmm.
Yep, it's like Entra Suite is big, so it covers ID governance, it covers the GSA, prior taps. So yeah, multiple different ways to think about it.
I want to also add to this, one thing that you can now do that's possible with private access is apply risk signals to on-premises users. So you can apply at the network layer all of these policies for risk to on-prem users. And that was not possible before private access. But now with private access, we're getting the signal. We're able to see the user data in Entra and apply the conditions. So this is something like pretty unique to Microsoft.
Nice. Cool.
Yeah, and even verified ID, like we can do live face check to then give somebody access package, which then puts them in a group on-prem and then gives them access to on-prem resources, right? So like it all really does interplay. It's nice.
Nice. Yeah, like it's just, you can just imagine it, right? So many different combinations. And yeah, even just yesterday I was talking to someone about the access packages, and even with Intune, or even to on-prem groups, now with group source SOA features as well. You can now start managing access to on-prem apps through ID governance and access packages, which is part of the whole Entra Suite set of services. So yeah, there's a lot of combinations that people can think. It's up to your imagination to bring them together now. So we have an awesome question. How can I, or when can I get rid of AD with my servers? Who wants to take that one?
I'll take a stab at that. On the one hand, I'm kind of thinking you could do that right now, today.
Yes.
On the other hand, I'm a consultant, and consultant's going to say what consultant's going to say, and that's going to say, it depends. Yes.
Yeah.
How did you know I was going with that? Well, jeez. Yeah, I guess so. It depends on context, right? In terms of why we got those servers in on-prem AD. As we've kind of established, you can move to Entra, and that can be your pure cloud-native identity platform. But a lot of folks will maintain AD for server management and pushing out things like group policy, maybe even updates and things like that. And there are a number of capabilities now that would allow you to move on from that. So I can give you one example off the top of my head where historically maybe things like Defender policies would have to be pushed out by a group policy. We now have security settings management that allows us to do that, honestly, kind of using Intune. But even things like Azure Automation Services, and we can now use Azure Arc to manage updates and policy that way. So there's a whole bunch of things you can do right now. But yeah, I'm going to pull out my consultant, get out jail free card and say, it depends.
Yeah, I mean, if it's Kerberos based, right? You kind of need a Kerberos identity to do stuff. So
yeah.
100%. And today you also have options like Entra Domain Services, which you can lift and shift some of the servers to the cloud and be able to do that so that they are connected to the cloud Entra AD instead of the on-prem AD. So you can start disconnecting. But the answer is it depends. I've worked with one customer they were like a startup, and they were moving all of their servers to PaaS services, Azure Functions, web apps. So they didn't need a lot of the servers, and then everything else was all M365 for them. So the domain controllers were just there because they were there for when they set it up. So it was really a nice way for them to shut down those, disconnect, and just go completely in the cloud. It reduced a huge sort of surface area, all this pen testing of servers, or like a lot of work that they used to do just didn't exist anymore. So it was a neat experience for them. Right. So we have another question from the tech community. For long-term modernization, which approaches do you prefer for replacing legacy LDAP-dependent auth apps? Is it reverse-proxy, OAuth, OIDC adapter? And what are the typical pitfalls, especially for orgs with vast on-prem presence for core apps that are mission critical?
I'll take the easy parts.
Yeah.
That one.
It's a lot of parts in that question.
Right. So there is a way to like push details back for through API driven provisioning for like applications and everything. So we might be able to push some things there. Entra App Proxy has always supported like pushing a password through an extension, so we can save passwords kind of base64 encoded, piecemeal it together, however you need to do that to kind of push the password into the app on-prem. But really, I mean, moving away from LDAP-based applications in general is going to be your long-term modernization, right? We want to get those to something that is more modern. But yeah, otherwise you're going to need a middleware layer on that authentication to really get rid of it. But not the whole org maybe needs access to those things. So that's the whole point of that cloud first or the AD minimization, whatever we want to call it, right? Is getting those users that don't need AD, just get them in cloud and let them be. And then now you've limited how much you have to work on there in AD.
Yeah, absolutely. Charles, you had some thoughts from the website?
Yeah, I mean, I think Nathan hit a lot, and part of that might be a bit of a developer question as well, right? Where we come in and start working with the developer on potentially modernizing those applications, getting those applications integrated with something like MSOL so that we can move those applications into Entra ID for authentication. So
nice. Yep. Yeah. For a long time, the story was try to modernize your app, which basically means you can do things like conditional access for those apps. With the on-prem, you couldn't do it before, but now with private access and so on, it's not an either or. You can sort of step up your way through, but it's always better if you can modernize those apps, move them off. A lot of the times we see apps that do support the modern auth, but you set that app up, a long time before, and you just use the legacy protocols then. But maybe most of the time those apps, if they are like, being maintained by the developer, especially vendor-driven apps, they do support the newer protocol. So it might be just a process of migrating them, and then you can do that. But yeah, for all of the legacy ones, those are really good tips that you shared. This is an interesting question. If you still have on-prem AD and we aren't ready to provision most users as cloud only, can we still use ID governance?
Short answer is yes, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Kind of like Nathan mentioned earlier, we got that ability to provision users straight into AD. And that's really one of the cool things about it, the whole platform. It's like you don't have to go all in on any one thing. You don't have to go all in the cloud. If you still have users as that source of authority, which a lot of orgs, that's going to be the case for quite a while because it's a big move to go cloud native. You can absolutely do that.
Yep.
And you're gonna assume hybrid identity here a bit as well, right? So things like Entra Connect, we provision those users back with, governance provisioning, and then effectively sync those users up into Entra ID. And at that point, any of our entitlement management, access package, anything else that we're doing in ID governance, we can start targeting those users with those packages or access reviews, etc.
Yeah, we're talking about apps, and the apps you can always do ID governance, regardless of whether the user is on-prem or in the cloud. That's always been possible. If you're talking about provisioning of users with ID governance, that's when the new things like the group, the user SOA, etc., that just came through. You can be provisioning through on-prem to the cloud, was how it always has been. But now you are getting better options to go the other way as well.
Yeah, and you might think AD means password. We can, with that lifecycle workflow, generate a temporary access pass, have the user onboarded to passwordless. They don't need a password in AD unless you have LDAP apps that actually need to check that password against. If it's Kerberos based, you enter Kerberos. So Cloud Kerberos Trust, set that up and trust those. And you're good to go. They can use Hello for Business and no passwords. It's great.
Cool. Awesome. All right. So this has been super interesting. We have one last question. What's the most important mindset or principle that practitioners should embrace as they start their zero trust and identity journey? We'll start with Melanie. And
Oh, that's an awesome question. I can't wait to hear everyone else's answers to this too. But I think seeing the zero trust journey as a win-win, where we're always verifying and never explicitly trusting the user, always verifying context, but that's also seeing it also as a win from the end user perspective, where everything that we're doing to apply these controls, the goal is to make this seamless from the end user side so that they don't even notice that these controls are in place. They're just able to get their work done and access all of their corporate resources. But from the admin side, all of the configuration is straightforward, and you're able to apply these controls from the beginning. Start out with these blanket policies, start broad with blanket policies that apply for your whole organization and get more granular. So that's a lot of things, but I think the mindset is seeing it as a win-win, where you're both making things more secure and making that end user experience seamless so they don't even notice that that security is there.
nice. Charles, your thought on what's the mindset people should adopt when embracing?
I love the question. I think first thing that I would say is don't consider zero trust as just a security checkbox, right? Like, this is really a business enabler. I think a lot of what we do is ultimately try to balance end user productivity with security. We don't want to negatively impact your end user's ability to innovate, but we want to still be able to secure what matters the most. And I think Merill and Rue, Nathan have all hit this, right? Don't boil the ocean. Start small as you're going through your policy deployments. Focus on privileged user access. How am I securing that? Where can I have those blanket policies where I'm enforcing MFA for all of my users at this point? And then kind of build confidence from those kind of early wins.
Cool. Awesome. Rue, your thoughts?
Yeah, geez, great answer so far. The one that comes to mind for me, and I'm going to make a little bit of an analogy here, is if I think about maybe historically when we think of security folks, we think of being really focused on networks and endpoints, right? And one of the principles of securing those is allow listing, and it's block by default, and then allow what you trust. And I really think that as we made this shift to the cloud, with platforms like Entra being that new security perimeter, it's been said 100 times, but it's very true, we kind of need to start looking at a similar story for identities, insofar as you want to block everything from doing everything, and then only allow gradually little bits of access over time. And that's, don't get me wrong, that's easier said than done, but that should be your kind of guiding principle of saying, well, how can I not allow any access to begin with, and then gradually expand from there.
Cool. Awesome. Nathan, closing thoughts.
Yeah. The principle of assume breach, right? It's old. It maybe predates zero trust, right? But it's still applicable. And it's not just that, like, we might be breached right now. As we're designing and building our policies and the architecture, like, assume that this next step fails, right? We want to build all of those layers, assuming that each one of those gets breached. What's the next possible thing that we need to be worried about? There's a lot of components in the Entra Suite that really help implement those additional layers. So that's kind of why we're here, right? And so that's helpful. And it's just, you can't view this thing as a zero trust or assume breach or any of that as a one step. And now we're done, right? The checkbox. It is going to be a ongoing project. You're always cleaning your house. It's always getting dirty. We just got to keep going, and we'll get there. Yeah.
Awesome. This has been super fun getting all of you together and doing this session. I've totally enjoyed it. So thanks everyone for joining in today for our second webinar on the practitioner series. So we focused on foundations and the initial steps you need to do before you can deploy Entra Suite. We covered a lot of ground today, especially the Q&A was amazing with all those conditional access and the Entra Suite related questions. And I hope people got practical tips on we answered your queries on what you can do today. So this is just the beginning today about laying the groundwork. If you can visit ak.ms/Entra Suite playbook. We'll share the link. Mark your calendar for the third webinar. We're going to go into a lot more detail, and a lot of the questions you asked today, we're going to go into depth about how you can do more of that with my colleagues from Europe, Thomas, who will be joining in for the next webinar. So on behalf of Rue, Nathan, Merill, Charles, and the entire team, thank you for being part of this conversation. Stay curious and stay connected, and we'll see you in webinar 3.
Everyone.